What's up guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Perry.
And today we are going to be showing you how to set up a two-person mobile podcast.
For today, we're going to be using our brand new R-Track 2x2 as the main focus, but you can take this information and apply it to whatever interface you have.
So since we're showing you how to set up a two-person podcast, the first thing we want to consider is what two microphones we want to use.
At Rockville, we have a variety of different microphones between dynamic and condenser microphones, but you want to keep in mind the pros and cons of each mic.
So for example, condenser microphones have a very high sensitivity, which means they pick up a lot of sound, including room noise, which is good if you want to pick up a large area. So if you have multiple people sitting around a microphone stand, a condenser microphone might be a good choice because it'll pick up each person equally. Now, a con of using a condenser microphone is that because they are so sensitive, it is going to pick up a lot of volume, so you're going to want to have them on a sturdy stand. You don't want them to be moving around because you're going to hear all of those bumps in the microphone themselves. And the other thing to take in mind is it's going to pick up things like the air conditioning and maybe some outside street noises. So it's just one of those things where it's going to pick up your guest or yourself very clearly and very presently, but it's also going to pick up background noise and ambient noise.
Then we have the dynamic microphones, which are very top address heavy, so you can put it up close to your face so that it's picking up the sound coming out of your mouth. And it's a very directional microphone, so it's not going to pick up any of the surrounding sounds, so it's going to be very focused on the voice. Another good thing is that you can hold the microphone without it affecting the overall sound while you're moving it around.
Another difference between condenser microphones and dynamic microphones is because condenser microphones are so sensitive, they have a tendency to picking up the plosives, so you're always going to want to make sure to use a pop filter whenever you are using a condenser microphone. On the other hand, a lot of dynamic mics, if you take off this top piece here, they feature a screen built in which kind of controls plosives. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you're trying to decide between going with a dynamic microphone or condenser microphones.
But there's absolutely no wrong answers, so if you wanted to use a condenser microphone for one person and a dynamic microphone for another, that's totally fine. It's just that the microphones are tools to record you and your guests.
So now that you have your mics picked out, the next thing you want to figure out is what you're putting your mics on. So with dynamic microphones, you can go for the handheld option, but if you're using a condenser microphone or maybe a more sensitive dynamic microphone, you're going to want to stand. Now the good thing is at Rockville we have a wide variety of stands that come in all different shapes, sizes, and applications, so you can check out our website and pick the one that best fits your needs.
We recommend using desktop stands because they provide the most flexibility when you're setting up a podcast on or around a desktop.
So again, we have a wide variety of boom arm desktop microphone stands with rounded base plates like this one and even this gooseneck one over here, but we also have ones that attach to the edge of your table, like the Rogan stand, the DMS-40, and the DMS-30.
For today, we're going to be using our very own RDMS-70 and our very own Rogan stand, but you can use any microphone stand that applies to your setup. And if you need any help setting those up, check out all of the videos we have available on that.
So now that we have our mics on our mic stands ready to go, the next step is to connect them to our interface. So to do that, we're going to take two XLR cables.
We're going to take the female end of each mic cable and plug them into the back of the microphones. Then we're going to plug the other ends into each channel on the interface.
Now remember, if you're using a condenser microphone in your setup, always activate phantom power or 48 volts of power for that channel.
The next thing we can do is connect the interface to the computer or laptop we're using, and we have a bunch of videos for the R-Track 2x2 on how to set it up to your computer, so feel free to check those out as well.
After you have your interface connected to your computer, you're going to want to open up the DAW you're using. In this case, we're using Logic Pro X, but this is also going to work on Audacity, FL Studio, Pro Tools, Ableton, GarageBand, whatever DAW you're using.
So on the DAW, we're going to create two tracks for each microphone, and be sure to pair them to the inputs we're using. So for today, we're using inputs 1 and 2. So we're going to set Mike's condenser microphone that's plugged into input 1 as input 1, and then my microphone that's connected to input 2 is going to be set to input 2.
At this point, we want to do a test before we start recording and make sure that yourself and your guest are at an appropriate level where it's not going to be clipping the recording. So you're going to want to go to the front of your interface and adjust the gain level knob to the appropriate volume.
So I'm talking into my microphone right now as Mike is adjusting the gain knob for my channel. Check 1 2, check 1 2, and he's making sure that we have a good level. And again, we're making sure we have a nice equal balance of sound.
A quick note is that, as we've been saying all throughout this video, condenser microphones are very sensitive, so you always want to make sure to level match them them with the dynamic microphone you're using or with another condenser microphone you might be using. And always remember on your condenser microphone that the phantom power again is turned on because you don't want to start recording with that turned off.
Now you're also going to want to hear yourself and your guests while you're recording, so we recommend setting up a couple of headphones.
Now on the R-Track 2x2, you'll notice it only has one headphone output, so to solve that issue, we're actually going to get a 1/4-inch Y cable that looks like this, that has 2 female ends and then 1 male end. You're going to take the male end and plug that in to the headphone output on the R-Track 2x2, and then each person can plug their end of their headphone into each available jack.
And then from there, you can use the headphone volume knob to control the volume coming out of both of your headphones.
Testing 1, 2. Yeah, I hear it in mine.
I hear it in mine too, it's very scary.
Now this Y cable trick is only going to be good if you have 2 pairs of headphones. If you have more people in the room or multiple guests, you might want to invest in a 4-channel headphone amp like our Rockville one.
So once we have everything all set between the microphones, the headphones, our interface, and our DAW, we can go ahead and start our podcast.
I'll tell you what, Mike, this podcast about how to make your own podcast is going to be the podcast of all podcasts.
I agree with you, Perry. This podcast that we're doing currently right now on how to set up a podcast is going to answer a lot of people's questions on how they can set up their own podcast.
And for podcasters who want to tell other podcasters or potential new podcasters on how to start a podcast, they can refer to the podcast about starting a podcast.
Couldn't have said it any better myself.
Podcast.
So hopefully this video showed you how easy it is to set up a 2-person podcast, and hopefully you picked up some tips and tricks on how to pick the right equipment for your specific setup.
But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support team through phone or email.
As always, guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Perry.
And we'll see you next time.